Montana Territory, spring of 1883. The wind came howling off the mountains when Delaney Rose staggered up the dirt trail toward the ranch house. Her skirts torn, her boots soaked, and one arm wrapped tight around a little boy no older than 4. A girl, maybe 6, clung to her other side, shivering despite the rising sun. She had not eaten in 2 days, but she had walked, and walked, until her feet bled and her throat burned, until all she could do was hope whoever lived behind that weathered gate would not turn her away. The ranch house stood alone in a wide valley beneath the Absaroka Range, the land raw and open, grass still wet from snowmelt. A fence circled the land, broken in places, and a few black cattle wandered near the edge. Smoke curled from the chimney. Delaney pushed open the gate, her breath catching. "You keep close," she whispered to the children. "No matter what happens, you stay with me." The boy, Kellen, nodded, his small hand gripping her skirt. The older girl, Kaya, said nothing. She had not spoken since their father left them outside a trading post 3 days ago. Said he was going to find work. Never came back. Delaney had not been their mother, but she had been their father's wife for nearly a year. And when he vanished, she had become the only one left. She raised her hand and knocked. The door swung open before her knuckles touched wood again. A tall man filled the doorway, around 30, maybe a little older, with rough brown hair, sun-bronzed skin, and a rifle slung against his shoulder. He wore a worn shirt rolled to the elbows, work gloves shoved in his back pocket, and boots caked in dried mud. His eyes a pale, steady blue locked on hers. Delaney couldn't speak. Her throat closed. He looked down at the children, then back at her. "You need water or you need help?" "Both," she rasped. He stepped aside. "Come in." She hesitated, then stepped over the threshold. Inside, the house was simple but clean wood floors, stone hearth, a long table marked with knife grooves. The warmth hit her like a wall. She nearly dropped. The man caught her elbow. "Sit." He pulled a chair out with one hand and filled a tin cup with water from a pitcher. "I'm Elias Boone. This is my place." "You're welcome here." She took the water, her hand trembling. Delaney Rose. "These are Kaya and Kellen." The boy pressed his face against her hip. Elias knelt and met the boy's eyes. "You hungry?" Kellen nodded. "Good. That's easy to fix." He stood, pulled bread from a tin, and cut slices without asking questions. Delaney watched him move quiet, efficient, like a man used to silence. She waited for him to ask what had happened or why she looked like hell. But he never did. He set the food in front of the children and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You walked far." "Yes." The fire popped in the hearth. He nodded once, like that was enough. Delaney took another sip of water. Her voice came back steady now. "Their father left us. Said he was going to find work and never returned. I waited a day, then another. When I realized when I knew he wasn't coming back, I took the children and left. We followed the river west. Someone in town said there was a ranch up here, a man who lived alone. I did not know if it was true. It was." Elias's voice was deep, calm. "You need more than shelter? I need a place. For them. And me. I will work. I can cook, clean, mend. I do fine on my own." Her heart sank. She had come too far to be turned away now. But then he added, "But I reckon 2 little ones and a woman with a spine strong enough to cross the valley on foot deserve better than fine." Delaney blinked. "You mean we can stay?" "I mean you will not walk another step. Not today. Not tomorrow either. This is a big house." She closed her eyes, just for a moment. Relief hit her so hard it made her sway. Elias stepped forward again, steadying her. "You have not eaten. I will be fine. I did not say you would not be. I said you have not eaten." He brought a plate and set it in front of her, same as he had for the children. For a long time, the only sounds were chewing and firewood settling in the hearth. Later, Elias showed Kaya and Kellen the back room. "Used to be my sister's when she visited. Has 2 beds. They can share." Kaya's eyes softened. She touched the quilt on the bed like it was gold. Delaney stood in the doorway, watching. Elias turned to her. "You can take the room across from them." "Only have 2, but I sleep out here most nights anyway. You do not have to do this." "I know." She looked at him then, really looked. He had lines around his eyes, not from age, but from weather and work. His hands were rough, but gentle when he guided Kaya's small arm through a sleeve. He had not once asked why. That night, When the children were asleep and the wind scratched at the windows, Delaney sat by the fire with Elias, clutching a cup of tea he had brewed from dried herbs. "You live out here alone?" she asked, watching the flames. "Have since I came back from the war. I thought most men left the army years ago." "I did, but it took me longer to come home." She nodded. She understood that kind of hurt, the kind that stayed buried. He looked over at her. "You got someone looking for you?" "No, no family. None who would want to find me." He did not press. Her voice dropped. "Why are you being kind to me?" Elias stared into the fire. "Because you asked for shelter. And I saw a woman carrying 2 children across a mountain road, when most men would not have lasted the night. That kind of strength deserves a home." Delaney swallowed hard. Her heart had been locked up tight for so long. She had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Not judged, not pitted, just seen. Elias glanced at her again. "You do not have to tell me anything you are not ready to." She looked up, her eyes meeting his. "Thank you." His voice was quiet. "You are safe here, Delaney." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. By the second morning, Delaney had already swept the hearth, patched a tear in one of Kaya's skirts, and started boiling water for linens before Elias came in from checking the fence line. He stood in the doorway a moment, watching her roll up her sleeves, steam rising from the basin. "You always work before breakfast?" he asked, setting his hat on the peg by the door. "I don't sleep past what's needed," she said without turning. "Idle hands never did me any favors." Elias crossed the room and poured himself coffee from the pot warming on the stove. "You don't have to earn your place here." She wrung out a cloth and laid it flat on the table. "I know I don't, but I want to." He took a long drink and leaned against the cabinet. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone tired enough to rest a while?" Delaney didn't answer. Her hands stayed busy, folding and pressing with quiet precision. Elias didn't push. After a moment, he set his cup down and said, "I could use help with the chickens later. Coop door's been sticking." Her eyes flicked to his. "I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I figured. You've got the look of someone who never waited around for someone else to fix things." Delaney gave a small nod, then returned to the cloths. "I'll come after the children eat." Kaya and Kellen were still at the table, Kaya helping her brother with the last of a biscuit. Elias noticed the girl had braided her hair, the part neat, the ends tied with a bit of scrap ribbon. She looked like she'd remembered she was still a child that morning. Later, under a sky as wide as the world, Delaney followed Elias to the coop behind the barn. The wind had died down, but the scent of thawed earth lingered in the air. She crouched beside him and examined the bent hinge. "Needs filing," she said, running her finger over the edge. "And the wood's swelling. Could use a shave." Elias nodded. "I've got a rasp in the shed." They worked without speaking, tools passed hand to hand. When the door finally swung open clean, she stepped back and wiped her palms on her apron. "I haven't heard you laugh," he said, not looking at her. She glanced sideways. "There hasn't been much reason." He didn't speak right away. "There's a creek half a mile east. Flows clear, even in summer. When I was a boy, I thought it was the edge of the world. Did you want to cross it?" "Did once. Found more trees, more rocks, same wind. Made me realize where you stand matters more than what's past the bend." Delaney considered him a long moment. "You're not like my husband. I didn't think I would be." He was the kind of man who smiled easy and lied just as quick. Elias dusted his hands and stood. "I don't smile much." She rose too. "I noticed. But I don't lie." They walked back toward the house, boots brushing through the tall shoots of grass that had started to wake after winter. When they reached the porch, she stopped. "I didn't think I'd feel steady again," she said. He paused at the door, fingers on the latch. "You don't have to name what you survived. It's enough to know you did." Delaney looked out across the field, where the children were chasing a moth between the fence posts. "You're not afraid to be alone, are you?" "No, but you let us stay. You didn't ask for pity. You asked for shelter." She stepped inside, her voice low as she passed him. "That's not all I found here." Elias said nothing, but when he closed the door behind them, it was with care, as though he understood some things didn't need to be spoken to be true. The first rain came soft, just after supper, tapping gently against the roof while the children played with corn-husk dolls on the rug near the hearth. Delaney sat sewing by the window, mending a ripped sleeve of one of Elias's shirts. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows, Threadbare at the cuffs, clothing kept long past vanity, repaired instead of replaced. Elias was outside, tending to the mule that had slipped a hoof in the creek bed earlier that day. She could see his silhouette moving under the lean-to, steady and unhurried despite the deepening dusk. "Kaya," Delaney said, setting down her needle. "Take your brother and get washed before bed." The girl rose without complaint, guiding Kellen by the hand toward the back room where the wash basin sat near the stove. Delaney stepped out onto the porch, pulling her shawl tight across her shoulders. "You should have come in before the light went," she said. Elias set down the hoof pick and straightened, brushing his hands on his trousers. Didn't want her favoring it come morning. Let her rest tonight. She'll be sound. He watched the rain a moment, then turned to her. "You always take to mending after supper?" "I like the quiet," she said. "There's something clean about it. Taking something torn and making it whole again." Elias leaned back against the post, crossing his arms. "You ever dream about leaving Montana?" "I used to," she said, her eyes following the way the rain traced down the eaves. "When I was younger, I thought the world had to be wider than this. But wide doesn't always mean better. You miss anything from back east?" She shook her head. "Not much. Maybe the sound of church bells on Sundays. The kind you could hear from 5 blocks away, like the whole town was being called to rise." Elias nodded slowly. "We had one at the edge of the valley once. The steeple rotted out 6 winters ago. Nobody rebuilt it." "You go to church?" He looked out at the hills. "Used to. Not anymore. Figure if the Lord wants to find me, he knows where I live." The rain picked up, heavier now, drumming on the porch roof. Delaney stepped under the overhang beside him, only inches between them. "Do you ever get lonely?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. She thought maybe he wouldn't. But then his voice came low, certain. "Not the kind that eats at you. Used to think meeting someone made a man weak. I don't think that anymore." Delaney watched him from the corner of her eye. "What changed?" He met her gaze. "You arrived." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It settled around them like a blanket, soft and unspoken, the kind of stillness that holds more than words ever could. She reached for his sleeve, thumb brushing the stitch she'd finished earlier. "You wear your clothes until they give out. I reckon they still have a little more to give." She let her hand linger a moment, then dropped it. "So do I." Elias didn't move, but his voice came quiet. "If you ever want more than shelter, Delaney, you don't have to ask." "I know," she said. The door creaked behind them. Kaya peeked out, hair damp, cheeks pink from scrubbing. "He's asleep now." Delaney nodded. "Go on to bed. I'll be in soon." Kaya looked between them, then slipped back inside. As the rain softened back to a whisper, Delaney turned to Elias. "The earth smells different when it rains out here." "Cleaner," he said, "like it's starting over." She looked out toward the dark ridgeline. "Maybe I am too." Elias reached for the lantern hanging at the post. "Let's go in." Morning comes early. Delaney followed him through the door, and as it closed behind them, the sound of the rain stayed on the roof, but not in her chest. The spring thaw deepened, and with it came the slow rhythm of belonging. Days stacked quiet on one another, each carrying the weight of small labors and the hush of something new forming between what had once been strangers. By the 3rd week, Delaney had taken to checking the garden plot after breakfast. Kneeling in the dark soil Elias had turned with a spade 2 summers ago and forgotten. The frost had lifted, and she pressed seeds into rows with steady fingers, Kaya beside her drawing furrows with a stick. Kellen napped on a blanket near the porch, his thumb hooked in his collar, his breathing soft. Elias came around the side of the barn with a broken yoke slung over his shoulder. When he saw the garden, he stopped. "You put in carrots," he said, "and parsnips, cabbage, and beans. There's room enough for what we'll need. I near given it up after the hail last year." She wiped her hands on her apron. "It's not the land's fault things go wrong." He watched her a moment. "You always plant in neat lines like that. I like knowing where things belong." Kaya stood, brushing her hands. "Mama Delaney says food you grow yourself tastes better." Elias looked at the girl, then back at Delaney. "She's not wrong." That night, once the children were asleep and the house held only the hush of wind through the shutters, Delaney sat at the table sorting through a bundle of dried herbs she'd found in the root cellar. Elias worked a whetstone over his knife, the sound even and slow. "I saw a raven this morning," she said. He didn't look up. "They nest near the bluff." Did it fly close? Landed on the fence. Watch me near a full minute. They say ravens remember faces. You must have made an impression. She ran her fingers over a branch of sage. In the town we passed through, the women wouldn't meet my eye. One clutched her boy's arm when I walked by. Does that still carry weight for you? He asked. No, she said. Not like it used to. I know what I've carried. I know what I've kept alive. He set the knife down. You ever think on what you want now? Not just what you've run from. I think on it every time I see Kaya laugh, she said. Every time Kellen sleeps through the night. That's for them. What about for you? She met his gaze. I want to stop bracing for the day someone takes it all away. Elias didn't look away. You won't find that kind of peace from me. Not because I'd leave, but because you'll have to believe I won't. Delaney's throat tightened. She reached for the mug beside her, though her hands weren't cold. I didn't come here to be saved. I know. I didn't come looking for affection. I know that too. But I do feel something here. Something I can't undo now. Elias leaned forward, arms resting on the table. Then don't. The fire had burned down low. Shadows crawled up the walls, long and soft. Delaney looked at him, not with fear, not with caution, but with the kind of quiet surety that comes after surviving too many storms to mistake calm for illusion. You've never touched me without purpose, she said. I won't, unless that purpose is you wanting it. She nodded once, slow. I like that you don't fill the room with noise. I like that you don't fill it with apologies. They didn't move from the table. But something between them did. Gently, like a gate swinging open in the wind, not forced, only ready. Delaney gathered the herbs into a tin and stood. I'll check on the children. Elias stood too. I'll bank the fire. She paused at the doorway. If I ask you to stay one night, not for company, but for comfort, would you? He met her eyes. Not unless it's what you truly want. But if it is, then yes. She held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded and stepped into the darkened hallway. Behind her, Elias moved slowly through the room. No rush, no assumption, just a man with steady hands and a heart that knew waiting wasn't weakness, only another kind of strength. The wind shifted near the end of May, brushing in from the east with the scent of pine and long days ahead. The snowline had retreated to the higher ridges, and the trails dried underfoot. With the garden planted and beginnings taking root in more than soil, the ranch moved into a new rhythm, one shaped by deliberate choices, not survival. Elias had taken to leaving the house early, often returning with fresh-cut fence posts or a brace of rabbits. On one of those mornings, Delaney found an old wooden cradle tucked beneath a quilt in the loft above the barn. Its legs were scuffed, the joints softened with age, but the curve of it was sound. She carried it down herself, wiping the dust with a rag until the wood shone. When Elias returned, he stood in the doorway of the barn, watching her polish the rail. I found it wrapped in wool, she said. My sister brought it out when she thought she'd stay for good, he replied. Didn't turn out that way. Delaney ran her hand along the edge. You want me to put it back? No, he said. I figure if someone's willing to carry it down the ladder, it ought to stay. That evening, Kaya helped her string new ticking for the cradle's mattress. She didn't ask why it mattered, only hummed low while Delaney stitched. Kellen slept curled near the hearth, one hand on the quilt Delaney had mended the first week they arrived. Later, after the children had gone to bed, Elias sat beside her on the porch steps. The last light of day caught on the grass tips, and the frogs had begun their slow chorus down by the creek. Something's changed in the house, he said. It's quieter, she answered. It's not, he said. But I don't mind the noise the way I used to. She didn't look at him. I've been late. He was quiet for a full breath. How late? 3 weeks. Elias turned to her. You sure? I am. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It settled between them like a blanket pulled up over both their shoulders. I didn't come here looking to start again, she said. But you did, Elias replied. She turned to him then, eyes steady. You're not afraid? I've seen what comes of hard things, he said. And I know what it means to hold on to something when it's worth keeping. Delaney swallowed. I didn't want to tell you until I was sure you'd want it too. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing the soft pad of her palm. You brought life back into this place. If it grows bigger, louder, warmer, I won't turn from that. She leaned into him, letting her shoulder rest against his. I dreamed a long time ago about a house where the walls didn't echo. This one doesn't, he said. They sat there until the stars came out, until the cold pressed gently against their backs and the warmth between them became something more certain than comfort. By June, the cradle had a place near the hearth, and Elias had built a small bench for Kaya beside the garden row, so she could read aloud while Delaney worked. A traveling schoolteacher had passed through, leaving behind a primer and a promise to return after harvest. Kellen learned to chase chickens with more laughter than trouble, and Elias carved him a whistle from a willow branch, though it rarely left his mouth after that. One morning, Delaney came out with her shawl wrapped tight and found Elias at the table, sliding a small wooden box toward her. Inside was a ring simple brass, shaped with care. "I don't have much in the way of courting," he said, "and I know you didn't come here for this. But I've never known peace until you made it." She reached across the table, her fingers curling around his. "You're the first man who ever waited for my yes." He nodded once. "Is it yes?" She smiled, the kind that spread slow and deep. "Yes." They married under the cottonwood tree behind the house, Kaya holding a bunch of wild flax, Kellen picking at the buttons on Elias's coat. The preacher rode 4 hours to get there, and the breeze caught Delaney's hair just as the vows were spoken. Elias kissed her gently, not as claim, but as promise. The days after were full of planting, of children's laughter, of nights that ended with soft words, and the warmth of two people who had learned to trust the quiet. Their daughter was born as the first frost touched the grass, a strong girl with Delaney's eyes and Elias's patience. They named her Wren, for the bird that had nested above the porch beam all spring, and for the way she filled the house with song without ever meaning to. Years passed like pages turned by a steady hand. The house never stood empty again. Kaya became a teacher, Kellen a boy who knew every fence line and every safe place to hide. Wren grew with the earth beneath her fingernails and her mother's strength behind her steps. And each night, when the fire burned low and the sky stretched dark above them, Elias would reach for Delaney's hand. They never spoke over the hush of it, never needed to. She had found her place not given, not taken, but built by love that held when the wind howled and stayed when the quiet deepened. And in that house beneath the Absarika range, with the cradle by the hearth and the garden growing wild, they lived out every day they were given in peace, in warmth, and in the kind of love that never had to raise its voice to be heard.